Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. And I say that because we have people joining us on the webinar today from all over the world. So I don't know what time zone you're in, so it could be morning, afternoon, or evening, or you might be listening to this after the live broadcast on the recording. Welcome. I am Laura Stewart. I am the Director of Online Channel Events for SaaSmax, and I'm excited to be here with you today for another installment of our Partner Perspective webinar series, How Your Peers Just Do It. I love this series, having been a former MSP, because there's nothing better than learning from people that have done it, that are living it and breathing it every single day. This is not your average webinar. This is real life words from a real life partner telling you how they have grown their business. A little housekeeping today. What we're going to do is talk about the presentation format. We've already spoken a little bit about the Partner Perspective series. We'll speak a little more. I'll mention our sponsor. I will introduce our two speakers today, talk about the topics, the main event, and then you'll hear a little bit about SaaSmax. Some housekeeping. All participants will be on mute during the webinar. We're going to present first, then open to Q&A. Use the question box inside GoToWebinar on your little panel probably on the right-hand side of your screen to type in any questions you have. If you have any issues or problems, you can chat to me, Laura Stewart, inside the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or help you through any technical difficulty. At the end of the webinar, we'll go through the questions and answer them for everyone. And there is a small survey. Please take a moment to answer it. It will help us give you better and more accurate webinars for you based on what you tell us you'd like to hear and see. So we go pretty fast. Time to get going. We'll have access to the recorded event at whysaas.com. So why Partner Perspective? As I said, it's direct from the horse's mouth. These are tips and tricks. These are real life, real world examples and knowledge based on how it is being done in the market today by resellers, MSPs, MSSPs, how you adopt, sell, manage profit from software as a service. We are so proud to be able to present this material to you today. Our sponsors for today are PaperTracer, business process management software, and Compliancy Group, HIPAA done right. I want to thank both of them today for sponsoring this webinar. I'd like to introduce now Clinton Gatewood, our SaaSmax channel chief. He is very well known in the industry. He's built 5,000 plus channel members for Zenith Infotech. He's the co-founder of Replibit, C-level channel exec, technology and entrepreneur. He's just an all-around great guy and a dear friend of mine. So please welcome Clinton Gatewood.
Thanks, Laura. As always, great introduction. I appreciate that. And just want to point out on our sponsors today, great products. Compliancy Group is great for anyone out there that's dealing with HIPAA and trying to get their clients HIPAA certified. So, and then out of that particular product, it drives a lot of additional products and services that as a solution provider, you need to fulfill. And PaperTracer is also one of those products that fit very nice and is a great companion product sale to Compliancy Group. So they're two really good products that can be used jointly. And we have several other products that go really well. And we really have a HIPAA bundle nowadays on different software as a service and cloud applications that you can utilize to completely fulfill the needs of your clients when it comes to HIPAA. So, after the webinar, reach out to us and we can help you understand all those different products that you can use in a cohesive bundle. And it's my pleasure today then to introduce Jyotin. So Jyotin's from SecureFLO. I've got to know him over the last 6 months or so, really, since our relationship started. We're off to a great bang with him, and I'll let him introduce himself a bit more. Great dynamic guy. I think you'll really enjoy hearing from him. Jyotin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for taking the time today. Thank you, Clint, in your introduction. Thank you, Laura, as well. As far as I'm concerned and SecureFLO is concerned, well, I've been in the security industry for a while. We originally started a while back with some folks from the Israeli Air Force, and then slowly learned a lot about security from those folks originally, and then transitioned into larger enterprise software companies, as well as then the Big Four, and moved into doing security ourselves, building a business around it. Having done all that and through the journey, I've learned a lot from both industry perspective as well as from a technology and how it's grown. And I'm looking forward to this discussion talk today and talking more about what we are doing at SecureFLO and how we are building our business and working with SaaSmax to both understand our clients, meet their needs, but also focused on security as a service, which is our model. So I'll start off just going through what I'll be talking about today. We are going to discuss, of course, managed security, or as we call it, security as a service. Then we will discuss talking about the risk and reward paradox from our perspective of what we've seen in the industry as far as how to present a security as a services vendor, how to present our services, or how we have gone about our business, and what we have learned from our partners, the overall perils and benefits of this particular business, and then talk about how we think, protecting your business is not only about protecting your customers' data, but also protecting your own reputation in the business, or trust factor. As you probably have seen in the news, we've been talking a lot about the elections and Facebook, and how Facebook has lost its large value, and Mr. Zuckerberg talking about trust. Trust is a big part of being in the cloud, trusting somebody else to manage your data, because today we are, even though we have the access to so much information, we are also sharing a lot about ourselves, both from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective on a day-to-day basis. So there is just a lot of data out there, which we are looking to not only share, but have the right to protect when we want to protect it. So we might want to be in a position to learn more about others, but that also has the negative connotation of a lot of people learning more about ourselves, which we may or may not want to share. So having said that, we will also talk about how SecureFLO is leveraging managed security to grow our business, and how SaaSmax has helped us learn about software as a service and leverage that and provide us and introduce us to great partners in the industry, great vendors in the industry, and moved us in the right direction. I'll share some thoughts with you around managed security. So in terms of opportunity, what we are seeing and what we've learned from a lot of industry experts, so the Verizon DBIR does a survey, and they've done an interesting study, and they've said the last one was 2016, that's been quoted a lot, and so they looked at about 451 Fortune 100 businesses, and they said, they asked them, are you looking to work with a security as a service provider or a managed security services provider? So it comes as an MSSP or a security as a service provider. 45% answered yes, out of which 42% also answered that they would deploy security software in the cloud to protect their data. So more and more companies, as you know, are moving to the cloud, and so that opportunity is also presents itself with providing them security not only as a solution but also as a service. Additionally, which is also an interesting factor, is in terms of repercussions, small businesses, so business of 1,000 employees or less, when interviewed recently in a survey, talked about the fact that 90% were more than likely to have a data breach, and their expectation is that the average cost of a single data breach to them is $216,000. That includes regulatory costs, that includes getting the business up and running, that includes partners that they may have to pay or will be liable to. So, looking at all that, you can see why security can be a topic of discussion and has been a huge topic of discussion. From a managed security services, I would say that how we look at the world and what we think managed security should be, it should always start with having the traditional security model of having a governance structure. So understanding a roadmap of where you want to be in terms of your data, because data today is whether it's your intellectual property or something you need to protect because of regulatory compliance requirements or from a business and legal risk perspective. So what you need to have is good governance within your business, which includes having good policies, procedures, having an information security plan, having things documented so that they are both shared with not only management, but with employees, so that they know what to expect, they know what is expected of them. The other part of managing managed security or managing risk to your data is your people. So, of course, skilled resources, as we know, are in shortage in security, even though that may or may not be 100% factor, because of the fact that I think if you were to look for certain skilled folks, you can always find them, whether on contract or as full-time employees. But more and more, there is a shortage, and especially with overall immigration practices around the world, including the United States, the level of skilled expertise is going to be in a shortage based on all the projections that we see coming from the industry. So people is a large part and a very important part, obviously, of any business, and having skilled employees or skilled folks in the security business is almost critical to the factor of having good security. The other part of managing risk is process. So as part of building governance and documenting your IT operations, you want to have good process, because garbage in is garbage out. So if you have poor processes, and process, I mean, things of the nature of how do you give access to your data or your applications or your servers? How are you looking at making sure your password are changed on a regular basis? Or how do you patch your systems or conduct change control? Do you have approval processes in place? How do you do business continuity plan? Have you tested it? Do you have a process to doing that? Do you have a process for notifying employees when you have a huge snowstorm, like we've had, at least in the Northeast, in the last few days, and continue to seem to have snow in spring? Then there is the technology aspect. And even though technology is what we see more so than others, because technology is what is advertised, that's what the salespeople are selling us, that's what we like to work with to solve our next problem in regards to access to data, storage of data, and the overall data life cycle. But technology comes almost at the end of this overall management of risk process. I think the more important aspect to this is that we need to look at the other three and they are equally as important. As you can see from the circles, they are as important as each individual block. So the governance, people, process, and technology are equally important to having a good managed security services practice, and also being a good advisory person or a partner for your clients. So I'm looking at it from a perspective today is how do we provide managed security, but also how a client is looking at managed security. Because the more we see clients, they seem to have a lot of technology, the same things to address or like multiple technologies to address the same problem, but they're not using the technology appropriately. For example, Splunk is a good example. Splunk has amazing capability, but requires skilled resources to apply and use it within the enterprise environment. Most companies are not using that. Um, Another one I would think of, which we see a lot of, is ServiceNow. ServiceNow for help desk, because it's a help desk as a service, and it's in the cloud as opposed to what used to be in regards to whether it's HP Service Manager or other solutions from BMC Remedy, etc., or even Jira. ServiceNow has huge capability, but is it being used appropriately? Well, it can only be used as well as your internal people are either skilled to apply it, and or there is good process built into it to use the solution, the technology that you've purchased. From next slide. From an MSP to, here I wanted to talk more about what is in the industry, what do we look at managed security services as? So the industry has moved and has a lot of names for these names for these services that are provided today. So we have security being addressed as SecAs, which is security as a service. We have a platform as a service. We have infrastructure as a service. We have software as a service, and now we have data desktop as a service, which is actually had been in the industry for a very long time, but it seems to be evolving more so because of the overall perspective of small businesses who don't have skilled labor to manage their desktops, as well as the issue with remote access and what is on your endpoints from a security perspective. So why do we think all these are important? Well, they're important because it's there are two perspectives to this story, right? So we in the industry, again, going back to a survey that was done by Secure24, IP theft in 2017 grew by 56%. So intellectual property, which is a big risk for a lot of companies from a data perspective, has the theft has grown 56% in the last year. Additionally, the overall most companies have a telecommunicating staff, which has grown 43%. So a lot of companies have shared workspaces. They use companies like the work bars, or there are lots of these WeWork kinds of companies which provide community working space, and so the companies do not have to invest in large office spaces and expect people to come into work. So there's more and more of this workforce which is telecommuting or working from home, which increases the risk to your data because you're managing for a large volume of data which is being accessed remotely. In addition, from a threats perspective, just to data, FBI had done a research again, which came from DBIR, that in 2016, $1 billion was collected in ransom, which was paid by companies based on the ransomware that was put on different businesses or client computers, or actually even B2, from as a consumer or a customer. Ransomware attacks, of course, are on a huge rise and were so much in the news in the last years, both ransomware and malware. But that in itself can cost a business and a consumer a huge amount in terms of both financial cost and just data loss and data risk. Um, so going back to the overall perspective of the data as a focus, we are accessing more and more data remotely. So we are introducing risk. We are accessing a lot of data and keeping a lot of data in our endpoints, even though we may be storing it in the cloud. And so we see in that an opportunity for small businesses to look at desktop as a service. We think desktop as a service is an area which will grow because more and more companies are concerned about how to manage their desktops and how to manage their workforce, and the overall theft, insider theft, or the theft of or the loss of PCs is a big concern, both for companies but also from a regulatory perspective. And you probably have heard of all the stories of people losing their laptops. In Mass General Hospital here in Boston had an incident such as that 3 years back, where on the red line somebody had lost their PC and there was unencrypted patient data, which had to be reported to the Attorney General, and then there were fines imposed on Mass General Hospital. And there have been many incidents such as that, where both data is either lost because somebody has lost a PC and or not otherwise intended, lost some data because they had it on a USB stick. The most common attacks or the loss of data as in the last year has come from phishing attacks, from stolen devices, from malware, from denial of service attacks, which are again online, and just from malicious insiders as well as ransomware. So malicious insiders and insider theft is a big concern for a lot of companies, but that is not a focus for most companies, because obviously they want to trust the people that they hire. The other aspect that we see a lot is the discussion on open source. So a lot of our customers are talking more and more about Elasticsearch and MeanStack and other open source solutions, and developing solutions and services and products in the open source space. And there's the overall discussion of how can we use data mining, data analytics in the open source space to both enhance our business, but also look at it from a security perspective. Does it have more security concerns? Are there issues around open source? And our perspective there is that open source in itself does not have inherent huge larger risks, but obviously we have to look at it from a data lifecycle. How is that data being accessed? Where is open source? What kind of code there you've developed? So have you done things like a secure code review? Have you looked at it from a perspective of the traffic that that particular code that you developed it takes? How does it store data? How does it manage it? How do you access it? And so we, in itself, I think open source is both an opportunity for us from a security perspective, but also an area where there are opportunities to develop solutions. And we certainly have used that to our advantage from a SecureFLO perspective.
So Joe, when you're looking at your clients and and you're seeing all this different research out there, where do you see some of the fastest growth for you on those pieces? Because in a lot of the enterprises and some of the larger companies they've done a lot to secure themselves, and you still see that lag in some of the SMB spaces, which are just as vulnerable. You're seeing a lot more attacks directed at smaller business nowadays, and where are you seeing that growth at?
Yeah, so from our perspective, I think the growth comes more in the regulatory space. So we see more around people who are concerned about their compliance initiatives, whether it be HIPAA. Now there is in There's a discussion about GDPR for companies doing business in Europe or have European data. So GDPR has been a discussion point. There has been a huge discussion around FISMA compliance from a federal perspective, as well as the overall compliance initiatives that people have around PCI and others. And that's the area where we see our growth, both from a perspective of doing compliance initiative in terms of assessments or providing readiness around things like ISO 27001 and other regulations, as well as building technology to be able to manage and track your own internal controls to understand where your risks are, where your gaps are, and then moving from there to, as I said, the hiring the right people, having the right processes, and deploying the right technologies. So our growth has been in the space of risk and compliance, leading to the security as a services practice, where we are providing remediation services to our clients. And that has been as an overall, where we've also seen a lot of clients talking to us about technologies that are in the market and how they see those from a perspective of opportunities, but also as threats. So things around IoT, we see a lot of companies in healthcare looking at IoTs, catheters, robotics capabilities, people looking at it from a home perspective on technologies which are hardware based, where they consider those as initiatives that they want to undertake, but they are concerned about how those hardware manufacturers are looking at security, specifically on protocols on how the data is passed from a central server to those IoT devices and how they conduct business. So IoT is an area where we see a lot of customers talking about it. We haven't seen a lot of business, but we see a lot of opportunity. We've seen opportunity in blockchain from a financial fintech perspective, where a lot of companies are using it for contracting, smart contracts, smart initiatives on letters of credit and in finance per se. And so blockchain is another area where we see a huge opportunity from a security perspective. Machine learning, I think, is the capability where you are able to crunch a lot of data in a very short period of time using both AI and otherwise machine learning perspectives. And we see opportunity there as well because of the fact that a lot of companies who have larger enterprise initiatives are looking at AI and machine learning to manage their threats. So they have a lot of data feeds coming in from all over the world, and there's a lot of data leaving their network, and they want to make sure that not only are they seeing all these alerts, and this is one of the problems that a lot of the businesses that we talk to have. They have all these different enterprise software which give them alerts, and most of them seem to be false positives because of the fact that they cannot address all the alerts that are out there. So alert management and incident response is a huge weakness for a lot of companies, and so they are looking at machine learning and AI to use that capability to reduce the number of alerts, streamline that process, and address what is really the issue at hand. And so the overall perspective of threat analytics in developing using machine learning for threat analytics and reducing the number of reducing the noise or the security threats in your environment is a big opportunity that we see for both small businesses as well as the mid-size clients. And that spans across healthcare, financial services, and retail specifically, but also now in education, biotech, genetic sciences, etc. And in that, we see opportunities around skills shortage. So we provide capabilities of risk and compliance and readiness work, but we see a lot of companies who are trying to do a lot with a very few people, and that is not necessarily because of the fact that they have smaller budgets, but because they can't find the right talent. And so there are opportunities around that, and that's why you know, whether you turn on LinkedIn or something else from a social networking perspective, you have recruiters and talent hunters, and there are so many names for that business today. But there's a huge demand for cybersecurity, as they would call it, and there's a lot of the shuffling of resumes and people looking for the right talent for X, Y, and Z solution that they may have, whether it's you know, something that they purchased or something they're trying to implement, deploy further. There is a skills shortage which seems to be growing from what we see, and we are definitely looking at companies where we can help them from a security as a services perspective, where we are saying, okay, well, you have this shortage, you cannot find the right people, we can provide it as a service, and not only can we provide it as a service, we're going to be around when you may have an issue where we can help you address it. And so we are not somebody who's going to deploy a solution and walk away. We are giving you both industry knowledge as we grow and you grow. We are also keeping up with the skill of understanding your business, and so we are addressing it from a business use case perspective, and we are there as a partner from a security perspective. So as companies look at it from a cloud, and they have vendors in the cloud, and they have vendors who are providing the software as a service, there is that ability to provide security as a service. I will say, though, we have seen, because there are so many vendors, most companies today are trying to reduce the number of vendors they work with. So that can be both a negative positive from a small company like SecureFLO, because we are not known in the industry, and so we deal with the trust factor or the brand name factor, and also because companies already have vendors that they deal with, whether for skilled resources or for software. And this overall software as a service is a newer concept, and so companies are not that open to introducing new vendors. They rather work with a vendor they already have, or most companies say, well, I have a cloud vendor like AWS or Google, and they can provide everything, and I'm already covered. Well, that's a big misnomer, because what we see in the industry is that, yes, AWS has, in the AWS marketplace, a huge number of solutions or vendors out there, but it is more like a Chinese menu. So just because you rented space on the AWS server, you're not automatically covered for everything security. So your servers are not automatically encrypted, your data is not automatically encrypted and protected, your folders are not automatically being monitored, your traffic is not automatically, has a front end detection, intrusion detection, or a data leakage prevention, a DLP device on it, or you are being warned if there is a breach or a ransomware or malware. You have to add those services on in your cloud. And most people just consider the fact that they have AWS, that they are covered. The other misnomer, which we see a lot, is that because somebody has signed up with a large cloud provider like AWS or GCP, Google Cloud Provider, Google Cloud, or Azure, they have this automatic assumption that those cloud providers are HIPAA compliant, high trust compliant, ISO certified. So my business is now, as a result of that, ISO certified, HIPAA compliant, FISMA compliant, FedRAMP compliant, etc. That is a huge misnomer, because that is not the case.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hear that a lot from different resellers and even some end clients and other people that I talk to, is you've got to make sure that everything is in there. When you talk about going to like an AWS or an Azure, there's items that you have to manage and make sure that the client's actually getting, because they assume, just like I think a lot of the solution providers out today are still assuming that all these things are just automatically covered. So part of that whole perils piece that you're talking about is really understand where you're at. Because like Amazon, you can go up and get a $250 server, and next thing you know, your monthly bill is running $500 to $600, and you don't know why. Or you need to add these types of things in, and what should have been a $200 server is now, oh, I found that there's these gaps. Now I've got to increase the cost to the client. How do I go about doing that? You know, once after I've already told them it's $200, and now I got to go back and say, well, I want you want a different site, you want this, you want that. Now it's up to $400. So you got to kind of watch out those things too.
Absolutely. And I think that's a critical aspect as we grow security as a service is, we see the most opportunity from companies other than from a compliance perspective of companies moving to the cloud. So the companies who are moving to the cloud are already selecting cloud vendors based on the fact that those cloud vendors are protecting them from a security perspective. And that's not always the case.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can buy a product and install that software and say, hey, I'm covered now. Well, no, you're not really. Or when it comes down as you're talking to about helping your clients be compliant, if you take HIPAA, for instance, a lot of the solution providers I talk to, they're like, hey, I did the security audit, we filled all that up, and you're covered for HIPAA. Sorry, no. That's only one small part of it, right? So not only are you exposing your client to HIPAA fines, you're exposing yourself that you can be drug into that lawsuit. So you need to be HIPAA compliant yourself and make sure when you're talking about processes, as you talked about above, some of those perils are you compliant yourself? Because you can definitely get drug into it.
Absolutely, and I think the small businesses specifically, as Clint mentioned, are susceptible to that because again, looking at one of the Verizon DBIR surveys, it's talked about the fact that 60% of SMB businesses close after just one breach. And the reason being that, they are talking about the fact that, HIPAA, we are HIPAA compliant and we are this and that, and they throw a lot of these compliance initiatives out there. But unless you are signing something around a business associates agreement, understanding the risk of what you're signing, making sure you're covered from a controls perspective, gaps perspective, in a very documented, procedural, process-based manner, and understand your indemnity clauses in regards to what dollar amount you're susceptible to, you're taking a huge risk by saying that you are compliant with all that, because even though when you are breached, the company may come down and say, oh, there is this particular dollar amount that we were fined, and that means that every vendor that's providing our services is going to pay a part of that based on the contract that they signed. And so this contract process is a very important aspect from a risk management perspective to look at when you're looking at compliance.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, it's the same thing as when you look at, and I know more about HIPAA than I do some of the other ones, but I know PCI and all the other financial ones have their gotchas too. But a lot of times what I've seen, especially in a small to medium business, from the solution provider perspective is, yeah, they do that threat analysis, they do that whole piece, and the security analysis, and then they fill those up, and they're like, hey, client, you're covered up. Well, no, you're not. It's about the agreements, it's about the employee processes. There's so much more goes into it, and it's not just healthcare companies that have to be covered. If there's a legal firm, they may have to be covered, and does your client have a proper BA with them, or if it's a hosting provider or anything like you've been talking about earlier. You really have to watch when you're going in and leading with risk management, you're leading with compliancy. It will drive a lot of great business to you and open up a lot of doors, but you got to make sure you're covered yourself.
Right. The one thing about risk management is, and what we see from a security as a service is that as data is becoming so prevalent, and data is your PII, your electronic patient health information, protected health information, or your intellectual property, or any sensitive data that you're looking to protect, you are susceptible based on not only your technology in-house, but all the contracts that you've signed with your various vendors or service providers. And there are there are aspects of everything that you use which is susceptible to loss of data. That includes some very non-technical devices like paper. Paper is susceptible to breach, as well as your fax machine.
Well, and your employees too, because I know of one HIPAA fine that was laid down, and or what they actually, the company didn't get fined. They could have gotten fined several $1 million, but one of their employees in the doctor's office talked to their spouse about something, and then that person knew the person they were talking about, and say, hey, you know, I hear you have cancer. I'm so sorry about that. And that person wasn't giving it out. Next thing you know, they were in a HIPAA issue, and the doctor's office was able to show, hey, I got all my employees are trained, my employees know that they can't talk about these things, here's all the documentation, here's everything, and they were able to fire the employee, and they didn't get fined by HIPAA because of that, because it was an employee mistake. So PEEP was a big thing. I was wondering too, how do you approach like IOT as you look at even small businesses, like even SASMAX? I mean, you know, we got quite a few employees, but most of us are remote. We really don't have a brick and mortar office. We all work remotely. So when someone's working at home and you talk about IOT, are there, you know, I'm curious, are there threats from that you have to worry about when you're working with clients like that of, okay, they've got their PC at home, they're on their home network, and they're running like an Alexa or something like that? Is there issues there that you have to address that they can't, you know, someone can't come in that way?
Right. So from a remote access perspective, or IoT devices that you may have at home, like you mentioned, Alexa, etc., we look at security from a data perspective. So we're looking at it from a perspective of in your endpoint, what kind of data you're transferring back and forth with the central server or the cloud where you're storing the information. We're looking at what you're downloading, what applications you're using. Alexa might be one of them. What kind of questions you're asking, where you're posting information, social networks, Facebooks, and etc. And then collecting that information to consider what is considered abnormal behavior or anomalous behavior from a behavior analytics perspective. So there is a risk around IoT for smaller companies where either they share too much, like you mentioned, from a HIPAA perspective, talk too much on social networks, which they shouldn't be or are not allowed to, or give access to Alexa to folders that they shouldn't be based on what they downloaded onto their PC or any other application which may have malware, for example. So the risk increases because of the fact that there are remote employees who are mixing work and pleasure, right? So they are working with work-related files, but also listening to music, talking on Facebook, having discussion on WhatsApp, having discussions, and putting things up on LinkedIn. You are sharing a lot of information in multiple realms, which come in and out of your work and professional life to your personal life. And sometimes by mistake, they tend to share too much. And that has happened a lot. You know, there was a case of a doctor here in Rhode Island, where she was on a night emergency shift, and one of these famous people, I believe it was somebody whose information was not supposed to be shared, and she talked a lot about with her friends on Facebook about how tough a night she had and where she had to go, and you know, the injury, etc. And in the meantime, she provided too much information and provided information about the person that she was treating, and that got her fired. So there is that aspect of sharing too much.
Yeah, so when we're talking about some of these examples, it really comes down to protecting your business and helping others protect theirs, really, which is really your next slide. So how do you go about you know, protecting your own business? I mean, we're coming up, you know, we got about another 10 minutes here presentation time. So let's kind of maybe move on to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a protecting your own business perspective, I would say that, you know, as we know, the global crime costs are just skyrocketing, and the overall, data says that there's going to be a $6 trillion cost on annual global cybercrime estimated by 2021. You're looking at making sure that your liability is limited. So as a business, you want to make sure that in your clauses, in your contract, say exactly what you're liable for, dollar amounts. You are making sure in your proposals what you're giving, clear information on what you're providing, how you're going to be providing it, and what are the limits of what you're providing. You want to make sure in your SLAs or your service level agreements that there's an understanding of what kind of security patches you provide for your software that you're selling or the service that you're providing. How many calls can somebody get? What is the level of service that you can provide around security and data theft and business continuity and disaster recovery, which are big concerns. And making sure that you do not overpromise on compliance agreements. You can sign a business associates agreement as long as you know that you are covered from a controls perspective and you share that. So that's very important.
Yeah, I think, and just there's a lot of misunderstanding on the BAAs in the marketplace, especially, again, when I talk to a lot of the service providers out there, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding there is you can sign a BAA, and even if you don't, if a particular client that you have is getting hit with a HIPAA infringement or a HIPAA violation, the next place that the HIPAA goes is that they'll come knocking on your door as a service provider. They're going to knock on the lawyer's door. They're going to knock on everyone's door. You're not liable just by signing a BAA. What's going to happen is the HIPAA regulator will come and look at your processes and stuff. And as long as you're doing a good job and you're compliant, you're not going to get drug into their issue unless, of course, you caused it. But so really, when you look at that type of compliance, you really need to make sure that you're, like you said, that your T's and C's are crossed, that your client's T's and C's are crossed. It's incumbent upon the company providing the service to make sure that they're compliant and not necessarily the healthcare company itself. Like if their lawyer, like if a breach happens because of their lawyer, but yet they had a BAA signed and the healthcare professional was compliant with everything, but yet the legal firm was not compliant. They did sign the BAA, but they didn't go through compliancy themselves. They'll be the ones that get hit with a fine.
Right, and I think the simple example there being, and this is what we have seen a lot of, and somebody needs to be careful about, is when you provide a proposal and you provide a service, you need to know what are the boundaries of that. So if I'm providing malware scanning or threat analytics, I'm not providing business continuity and disaster recovery. So if you had a breach, there was malware, just because your systems were down and you did not have a good business continuity process, that's not the problem of a security services provider providing you threat analytics or malware. So that's why it's important to have boundaries and make sure that just because they had a breach and their systems didn't come up in time or they lost a lot of downtime, that is not the problem of, or considered to be a problem. Just that was a problem because they didn't have a good disaster recovery process. They didn't have a business continuity process. So there are related processes that you can be dragged into. You just need to watch for those.
Yeah, I guess my last caveat on the HIPAA piece, because I talk about it a lot, I know a lot more about it, but on the compliancy piece as a solution provider, make sure that you are HIPAA compliant, that you have followed all 5 or 6 areas there, because you can get dragged into it.
And exactly, and then not only you are compliant, but also you're testing your compliance. So make sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, like I said, a lot of solution providers think if they do a security audit and then fill those gaps, that everyone's HIPAA compliant. No, it's not. There's 5 or 6 major areas of HIPAA compliance that you have to, and it's constant testing of those having the processes laid out, making sure your employees are getting regular training, and that you're following that, and that you're testing those systems. I mean, that all comes into it. It's not just about a security threat analysis and then filling those gaps. So what about cyber insurance? There's a lot of talk about that. Or, are you covered?
Right. So, from our perspective, yes, we do. We look at cyber insurance as an essential part, especially for SMBs, but also from our perspective for our own as part of the business. But I think it is very important to understand from a cyber insurance perspective for your business is what is that cyber insurance going to provide you and what are the caveats, because every insurance has a caveat, right? So making sure that you are not expecting them to cover you in the event of a breach without you having a good risk assessment process, everything documented, understanding your gaps, as going back to the overall HIPAA compliant process, right? So making sure when you're saying you're compliant with X, Y, and Z and you have a breach, that you are actually, and you can prove it. You have evidence to prove it. And also understanding the limits of the cyber insurance. So insurance it's not going to cover you for every dollar that you lost or every dollar's fine that you have. It'll cover you for part of it. So you need to both have that understanding and be clear on what it's covering you for and how much. Those are critical aspects. And then I think there are a lot of companies, and we included, have solutions like malware scanning, where we are working with companies where we can provide you the scanning with cyber insurance. So in the event you do get malware or ransomware, the insurance will cover you for the cost of your breach up to X amount.
Sure. So moving on to leveraging your managed security to grow your business. Let's talk. We got about 4 minutes here to finish out this last slide, and then we'll go to questions. So folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat in the chat piece so we can try and answer some of your questions at the end. If we do go just a little bit long because we got some great questions here, we will ourselves stay a little bit longer. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So from our perspective, I think. As SecureFLO, as we have grown our business, we have focused on strategy and focused on risk. Our strategy is that data is the most valuable commodity, and we need to understand the risk to that data, so we need to understand your data lifecycle. We focus on business because each business use case is different, and so the overall perspective, the best security you can provide is risk remediation based on business use cases. So you need to understand the business. You need to understand if you're in healthcare, it works in a different manner. It may be more decentralized than in financial services firms, where it might be more centralized, the decision-making process. Selecting the right vendors. So in regards to security as a service and working with SaaSmax, we understand that the vendors that fit into our overall strategy and model work best for us. And that is always based on, again, going back to the client. So what is the market looking for? Understanding the pulse of the market, understanding what the clients are really in need of, whether it's a desktop as a service or it's malware scanning or vulnerability scanning or pen testing as a service. There are specific needs, and we look for vendors and work with companies like SaaSmax specifically around making sure we're getting the right vendor who works with us and addresses the particular needs. Finding the clients, I think that is always the most critical aspect for most businesses. And I think from our perspective, it's all about security is an insurance policy for a lot of companies, and it's a trust relationship you need to have. The clients we work with them long term, and we try to make sure that they refer us to new business because they are satisfied with the work we do. Because a client lost is, from our perspective, a large business loss. So we focus on that long-term relationship with our clients, and we work with, in regards to finding clients, we have both industry experience, contacts, networks, working with SEO, working with email marketing, and all the overall marketing strategies to find the right clients. But I think our perspective is that referrals are our largest business, and we work with clients on a long-term basis. And then from a internal culture and from a client culture, training is key. Because security is a culture change, and in a lot of cases, people find that sometimes intrusive, especially doing background checks and all these other relationship things when they bring people on. because it's not that you don't trust your employees, it's that is a compliance requirement, but also in some cases it's required to do business in the right way, but also training around security, training around technology, training to make sure you're compliant with things like HIPAA, and that people are signing up for that training. They understand that they've been trained and they understand what they've been trained for. So a lot of companies do training and they say, oh, well, all our people are trained. But when an auditor comes in, they want to see somebody signed off as an employee that I was trained, I understand English, and I comprehend what I was trained on, and I'm going to follow those practices. So they want a signature. So training is important, but I think it's important to make sure that when you train, you have evidence that you trained the folks and they understand what they were trained on, so that each individual employee is empowered to learn and grow within the company and also help the clients that help the company. With that, I would say that I thank everybody for the time. I thank SaaSmax specifically also for allowing us to speak today. I know I may have taken a little bit more of that time than I expected to, but I hope it was valuable in terms of some of the information shared.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. We answered quite a few of the questions as we went through here already. I would let you know that with SaaSmax, we work very closely with Jyotin and his team, helping him find the vendors that he's looking for. That's what we do for all our resellers. We're kind of part of Jyotin's R&D team, if you will, or product team, helping him find the right products, the right services that meet his business models, his needs, the needs of his clients from that standpoint. And pretty soon we're going to be doing a joint venture together with him on helping him actually get end clients. So I'm very excited about that. And yes, Jyotin, that's going to start very soon. I know you've been thinking about that.
Yeah, no, SaaSmax has been is a key contributor to our finding not only clients but also vendors and working with the right partners. So.
Yeah. We like to bring the right partners who are going to help find clients too, and not just ask you where's my next. Where's my next sale at, right? So, but we're here to help everyone that's on the call. If you're not already a SaaSmax solution provider, you can do that very quickly. You just go to our website, and there's no cost for you. I mean, we're going to work with you, spend time with each one of our solution providers to find out what their strategic goals are, where they want to head, and where they need to move, and help them meet their goals and get them clients. So you can just go to our website, SaaSmax.com, click in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see a register area up there. You hit register, select, I think it says reseller, and go ahead and submit that. And then my team is made up of SaaS Cloud strategists who we will be in touch with you, talk to you about your organization, what it is you want to do, get you approved, and we'll move on the road to making money together. We're all here to make some money, so and we love to share that. So,
absolutely.
And Jyotin, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed having you here. I really enjoyed the friendship that we've started to create here, as well as your professionalism and the stuff that we're doing professionally together as well. And thank everyone for their time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jyotin.
Thank you. Thanks, Frank.